On New Year's Eve 2025, while most Americans were counting down to midnight, some of the wealthiest people on the planet were counting something else. They were counting the hours left before a single piece of proposed legislation could cost them billions. Not millions, billions. In the final days of December 2025, a mass exodus began. Google co-founder Larry Page purchased $173 million of waterfront property in Coconut Grove, Florida, and began deactivating more than 45 California LLCs. Sergey Brin, his co-founder, terminated or moved 15 California entities to Nevada. Peter Thiel, the PayPal co-founder worth roughly $28 billion, packed up on New Year's Eve and registered as a Florida voter in Miami. David Sachs, the former PayPal COO and current White House AI advisor, left that same night for Austin. Venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya posted what became one of the most shared financial statements of the decade. Quote, "The total wealth that has left California is now $1 trillion. We had $2 trillion of billionaire wealth just a few weeks ago. Now 50% of that wealth has left. $1 trillion. Let that number sit for a moment. That's more than the entire GDP of Saudi Arabia, more than the combined market capitalization of Coca-Cola, Disney, Nike, and Goldman Sachs. That amount of wealth didn't just evaporate, it moved. It relocated, it packed its bags, loaded the trucks, and drove across state lines to places like Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Nevada. And it's not coming back. But here's the part that should concern you. This wasn't the beginning, it was the crescendo. Because for years, for over a decade, California has been slowly bleeding people, businesses, money, and faith. 3 million more Americans have left California than have moved in since 2010. Over $102 billion in taxable income vanished between 2020 and 2022 alone. 789 corporate headquarters relocated between 2011 and 2021. U-Haul ranked California dead last in its growth index for 6 consecutive years. The state that built Silicon Valley, fed the nation, powered Hollywood, and generated $4.1 trillion in GDP, the 4th largest economy on planet Earth, is watching its wealthiest residents walk out the door at a rate of 1 taxpayer every 1 minute and 44 seconds. So the question isn't just why this is happening. The question is, can anything stop it? And what happens to 40 million people if the answer is no? Before we go any further, we need to be honest about what $1 trillion left California actually means, because depending on how you measure it, that number tells a different story. The most credible origin of the trillion-dollar figure comes from Bloomberg, which analyzed corporate filings for more than 17,000 investment firms. What they found was that firms managing close to $1 trillion in client assets had shifted their headquarters out of California and New York, gravitating toward the Sun Belt, primarily Florida and Texas. This isn't a measure of personal bank accounts being emptied or funds being withdrawn from the state. It's a reclassification of where investment management firms are legally headquartered. When Elliott Management, managing over $59 billion, moved from New York to West Palm Beach, the AUM moved on paper. When Charles Schwab relocated from San Francisco to Westlake, Texas, same thing. When Fisher Investments left the Bay Area for Washington and expanded into Texas, same thing. But there's a second parallel story that's arguably more alarming because it's about real people making real decisions. And this is where the IRS data comes in. According to the National Taxpayers Union Foundation, California lost a cumulative $102 billion in net adjusted gross income to interstate migration between 2011 and 2021. And the pace is accelerating. In 2018 and 2019, the state was losing roughly $8.8 billion per year. Then COVID hit, remote work became permanent for millions of workers, and that number nearly tripled to $29.1 billion in 2020. By 2022, the most recent complete IRS data year, California experienced a net loss of over 143,000 tax filing households, carrying $23.8 billion in adjusted gross income. Among high earners, those making $200,000 or more, the state lost a net 24,670 affluent households in a single year, along with $16.1 billion in high-income AGI. The California Legislative Analyst's Office put it plainly in a landmark July 2024 report. Annual net domestic outmigration roughly doubled from about 170,000 people in 2019 to about 300,000 post-pandemic. And the composition changed. Before the pandemic, it was mostly lower-income households leaving. Since 2020, more middle and higher-income households have been moving to other states. Foregone state personal income tax revenue jumped from 0.5% of total collections before the pandemic to 1.6% by 2022. That's a threefold increase. Then came the event that turned a stream into a flood.
California voters may decide in November to impose a 5% wealth tax on residents worth at least $1 billion. So that's about 200 billionaires and about $100 billion in revenue.
In October 2025, the SEIU United Healthcare Workers West filed a ballot initiative in California proposing a one-time 5% excise tax on the worldwide net worth of any resident exceeding $1 billion. The proceeds, proponents said, would raise $100 billion over 5 years for healthcare and education, enough to plug Medi-Cal's $19 billion federal shortfall and prevent cuts to 1.6 million low-income residents. On the surface, it sounds straightforward. Tax the billionaires, fund the hospitals. But the mechanics of this proposal were what sent Silicon Valley into a panic. First, it taxed unrealized gains. That means founders like Jensen Huang or Mark Zuckerberg, whose wealth is tied up in company stock they haven't sold, would owe 5% of their net worth in cash. To pay a 5% wealth tax on illiquid stock, a founder would need to sell shares. Second, it applied to worldwide assets. You couldn't shield wealth by moving it into out-of-state trusts or overseas holding companies. The proposal explicitly targeted grantor trusts, piercing the corporate veil that typically protects complex estates. And third, it was retroactive. The measure defined applicable individuals as those who were California residents as of January 1st, 2025, a full year before the proposed effective date. This was a Hotel California clause. You could check out anytime you liked, but if you hadn't left by that date, you still owed the tax. When the effective date was amended to January 1st, 2026, it created a narrow escape window, and the wealthiest people in America took it. Tech journalist Mike Solana reported interviewing 21 billionaires responsible for something like 50,000 employees, running companies worth a combined $1.3 trillion. Entrepreneur David Friedberg estimated $2 to $2.5 trillion in assets were already committed to leaving. DoorDash co-founder Andy Fang called the proposal stupid and said it would be irresponsible for me not to plan leaving the state. Not everyone ran. Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, the most valuable company in the world, provided a notable dissent.
We chose to live in Silicon Valley, and whatever taxes, I guess, they would like to apply, so be it. I'm perfectly fine with it.
It never crossed my mind once, but Huang is the exception, not the rule. To understand why the exodus is happening, you have to understand the math. California's tax structure creates the single largest financial incentive for wealthy migration in the United States. The state imposes 9 progressive income tax brackets ranging from 1 to 12.3%, plus a 1% mental health services surcharge on income above $1 million, yielding a 13.3% top marginal rate, the highest of any state in America. In 2024, California eliminated the wage ceiling on its state disability insurance payroll tax, adding an uncapped 1.1% levy that pushed the all-in top rate on wages to 14.4%. Capital gains? Taxed as ordinary income at up to 13.3%. On a $100 million business sale, California's state tax alone runs approximately $13.3 million. In Texas, Florida, Nevada, Wyoming, or Tennessee, zero. Literally zero. The savings scale dramatically with income. A $1 million earner saves roughly $120,000 a year by moving to a no-income tax state. At $10 million, you're saving $1.3 million a year. At $100 million, you save $13 to $14 million a year. At $1 billion, you're talking about savings in the 9 figures annually, every single year, for the rest of your life. The Tax Foundation ranks California 48th out of 50 on its State Business Tax Climate Index. Chief Executive Magazine's annual CEO survey has ranked California dead last 50th out of 50 for over a decade. Texas has held the #1 position every year since 2001. This subject matter can be hard to digest, but for most Americans, their personal financial situation is the hardest subject to approach and manage. But with the DollarWise budgeting app, you can finally take control. And since there's a free trial, you can see for yourself Get a full picture, automate your budget, get powerful insights, and set real goals that change your life. Stop with the overcomplicated budgeting apps like YNAB that no one can figure out. No more being told what to do with Ramsey's Every Dollar. End up being sold a mortgage with Rocket Money, and don't let private equity own you with Monarch. Take the change you need with a budgeting app that was built for people like you, by people like you. Go to dollarwise.app or click the link below to start your free trial. Jared Walsack of the Tax Foundation put it this way: it's not a coincidence that California poses some of the country's highest taxes at a time of much greater tax competitiveness, when 29 states have cut individual or corporate income taxes in the past 3 years. California is only one of a handful to have actually raised taxes. Elon Musk announced his move to Austin, Texas in December 2020, citing COVID lockdown frustrations. He subsequently relocated Tesla's headquarters from Palo Alto to Austin in 2021, SpaceX from Hawthorne to Starbase, Texas in 2024, and X, formerly Twitter, from San Francisco to Bastrop, Texas in 2024. His estimated California income tax savings from Tesla stock sales alone exceeded $2 billion. This is the final straw, he declared. Peter Thiel compared California to Saudi Arabia on Joe Rogan's podcast. You have a crazy religion, he said. Wokeism in California, Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia. He donated $3 million to fight the billionaire tax before leaving. Larry Ellison, Oracle's founder worth roughly $242 billion, moved to Hawaii around 2020 and sold his Pacific Heights mansion for $45 million in 2025. Joe Rogan relocated to Austin in 2020. As soon as they started locking things down, I began house shopping in Austin. The corporate departures are equally striking. A Hoover Institution study documented 352 companies that moved headquarters out of California between January 2018 and December 2021, including 11 Fortune 1000 firms. The relocation rate tripled from 2018 to 2021. Tesla to Austin, Oracle to Austin, then Nashville, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise to Houston, Charles Schwab to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Chevron to Houston, SpaceX to Starbase, In-N-Out Burger to Tennessee, Toyota North America to Plano, Texas. And those are just the headliners. A Spectrum Location Solutions analysis found approximately 13,000 companies left California between 2008 and 2016. A Freedom Economy Index survey found 40% of California employers were actively looking to move, while only 13% said they were happy where they are. And then there's the U-Haul Index, a surprisingly telling metric. U-Haul has ranked California dead last, 50th out of 50, for 6 consecutive years, reflecting the greatest net outmigration of one-way truck rentals of any state. Texas ranked number 1 for the 7th time in 10 years. The California to Texas corridor is the single largest interstate migration flow in the United States, with over 102,000 people making the move every year. Here's something the billionaire tax debate obscures. The people leaving California in the greatest numbers aren't billionaires. They're teachers, nurses, firefighters, and young families who can't afford to stay. California's median home price reached $869,300 in the fourth quarter of 2025, more than double the national median of roughly $404,000. Only 18% of California households can afford the median-priced home, compared to 39% nationally. The income required to buy that home, approximately $222,000 a year, assuming a 20% down payment. California's median household income is roughly $80,000. That's not a gap. That's a chasm. In San Mateo County, the minimum qualifying income for a median home exceeds $500,000. San Diego's median new home price has crossed $1 million. The state's home ownership rate stands at 55.5%, fully 10 percentage points below the national average. Remote work shattered the assumption that high-paying jobs required physical proximity. The Bay Area had a 28% remote work rate in 2021 and 2022. The highest of any region nationally. As one PPIC researcher explained, during the pandemic, high education, high income people were leaving the state in big numbers. That hadn't happened before. It was about the flexibility of remote work, being able to work somewhere else where it was cheaper to live. What does cheaper look like? A $1.2 million home in Irvine. California buys you a 5,000 square foot estate with a pool in Austin suburbs. Nashville's median home price is $519,000, 40% below California's. Tennessee housing costs run 50 to 60% below California levels. And then there's regulation. California contains approximately 420,000 regulatory constraints, the most of any state. The average California business is subject to roughly 3,700 constraints, compared to a national median of 1,400. A typical city requires 8 local permits just to start a business. One small business owner cataloged reporting to 18 federal, 22 state, and 8 county agencies, any of which could shut the business down. Then there's quality of life. California's 187,000 homeless residents represent 28% of the entire nation's homeless population, despite the state holding only 12% of the population. The January 2025 Los Angeles fires, the most destructive in state history, destroyed over 17,000 structures with estimated damages of $250 to $275 billion. Home insurance premiums have risen 41% in just 2 years. State Farm alone non-renewed more than 30,000 homeowner policies. As one LA resident put it during the fires, they've had the same insurance for 75 years and these insurance people decided to cancel their fire insurance. And they wonder why people leave California. California's fiscal architecture concentrates risk in a way unmatched by any comparable economy on Earth. Roughly 175,000 households, the top 1% of earners, pay between 38 and 50% of all personal income taxes in any given year. Personal income tax makes up nearly 70% of general fund revenue. Do the math, the top 1% effectively funds 27 to 32% of the entire state government. As California's own legislative analyst has warned, shocks to the income of this relatively small group of taxpayers can have a significant impact on state revenue. Capital gains amplify this volatility to an extreme degree. Capital gains tax revenue has ranged from $2 billion in 2009 to $15 billion in 2017. Stock compensation at just 4 technology companies accounted for nearly 10% of total income tax withholding in the first half of 2024. Think about that, 4 companies. 10% of the state's income tax. The resulting budget swings are breathtaking. California posted a record $97.5 billion surplus in 2021 and 2022, driven by stock market gains and federal pandemic transfers. Within 2 years, the state faced a projected $38 to $68 billion deficit. That's a swing of approximately $175 billion. The LAO projects deficits returning to $18 billion in 2026 to 2027 and potentially $35 billion annually by 2027 to 2028, with cumulative deficits totaling $125 billion over 4 years. The LAO director stated it plainly. These deficits have persisted even as the state's economy and revenues have grown, underscoring that the problem is structural rather than cyclical. And it gets worse. The Proposition 30 and 55 tax surcharges on upper-income filers provide more than $10 billion annually, but they're set to expire in 2030, creating another fiscal cliff. When those surcharges were first implemented in 2012, Hoover Institution research found that behavioral responses eroded 45 to 61% of projected revenues within just 2 years. People changed their behavior. People moved. The money California was counting on simply did not show up. Democrats achieved a legislative supermajority in California in 2012 and have maintained it with only brief interruptions. As of 2025, the Assembly stands at 60 Democrats to 20 Republicans. Under Proposition 13, a 2/3 vote is required to raise taxes, a threshold the supermajority now clears without a single Republican vote. Less than 1% of bills introduced in the 2025 session had bipartisan authorship. Governor Newsom has taken a contradictory public stance. On corporate departures, he's been dismissive, telling Fox News, "We create more companies every single day, more millionaires." 1/2 of America's billion-dollar valued companies are in the state of California. But on the proposed billionaire tax, he's been sharply critical. The impact of a one-time tax does not solve an ongoing structural challenge. You would have a windfall one time, and then over the years you would see a significant reduction in taxes because taxpayers will move. Republicans have been vocal. Carl DeMaio of Reform California, "This isn't about taxing billionaires. It's about giving politicians the power to go after everyone's savings when their spending spirals out of control." Legal commentator Adam Mitchell of the Cato Institute called the wealth tax a really economically disastrous idea that is both diagnosing the problem incorrectly and also won't fix the problem that is being diagnosed. But the centrist analysis is arguably more important. Take a moment and get some free, easy money. With a Chime checking account and my link, you can get $350 when you set up direct deposit deposit and pair that with a nation-leading high-yield savings rate, there's literally no reason not to sign up right now. Chime.com/Caleb or link in the description below. Democratic Mayor Matt Mahan of San Jose offered perhaps the sharpest intra-party critique. Driving billionaires out of state might feel good in the short run, but working people will pick up the tab as the top 1% already account for 40 to 50% of California's income tax revenue. Public polling reflects the divide. 60% initially support taxing billionaires. That number drops to 46% when economic risks like job losses are explained. The gap between those two numbers is the gap between the slogan and reality. In the interest of fairness, let's present the strongest version of the counterargument, because California's defenders have formidable data of their own. California's GDP reached $4.1 trillion in 2024. Surpassing Japan to become the world's fourth largest economy, behind only the United States as a whole, China, and Germany. The state's economy grew 6% that year, outpacing the US, China, and Germany. Silicon Valley's aggregate market capitalization stands at $14.3 trillion. In 2025, California startups raised approximately $210 billion, roughly 62% of all US venture funding, driven by AI mega deals. A UC-led multi-institution study using 16 years of credit data found, quote, no evidence of a pronounced exodus from the state. Cornell sociologist Cristobal Young found that after California's 2004 millionaire tax, the highest income Californians were actually less likely to leave. His research shows only about 2.4% of millionaires move annually. California's population has actually grown for 3 consecutive years after its pandemic dip, driven by international immigration that added 718,000 residents between July 2022 and July 2025. These are real facts. California isn't collapsing tomorrow, but there's a critical caveat. Both major academic studies use data through early 2021, predating the worst of the exodus. Stanford's research center subsequently found California was hemorrhaging residents to neighboring states at higher levels than ever before, across all income levels. And the 2025 to 2026 billionaire flight is a qualitatively different phenomenon. It's not gradual erosion, it's rapid, deliberate capital relocation by the state's most consequential taxpayers. History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, and the parallels here are unsettling. New York lost a cumulative $1.1 trillion in adjusted gross income capacity over 2 decades of net outmigration from 2000 to 2020. Its share of national millionaires fell 31%. Governor Kathy Hochul opposed a proposed millionaire tax increase explicitly because, in her words, we cannot have them leave the state. Connecticut offers an even more targeted warning. Just 357 families account for 14.1% of all income tax revenue. When hedge fund manager Paul Tudor Jones moved from Greenwich to Palm Beach in 2016. It cost Connecticut an estimated $30 million per year every year. Other fund managers followed. The state lost a cumulative $16.3 billion in annual AGI between 1992 and 2016. Detroit illustrates the extreme endpoint. From a peak of 1.85 million people in 1950, the city collapsed to 639,000 by 2020, a 63% decline. Over 2/3 of businesses closed between 1972 and 2015. Median home prices dropped from $82,000 in 2007 to $16,000 in 2011. 40% of streetlights were non-functional. The city filed the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history in 2013, carrying up to $20 billion in debt. The vicious cycle of high taxes plus declining services driving more departure, driving worse revenue, driving worse services is the dynamic California's critics most fear. And internationally, France imposed a wealth tax from 1982 to 2017 and triggered the departure of approximately 60,000 millionaires with an estimated 200 billion euros in capital flight, twice the revenue the tax raised. President Macron repealed it in 2018, explaining, "My predecessor taxed the wealthiest. What happened? They left." 9 of 12 OECD countries that implemented wealth taxes have subsequently repealed them. Sweden abolished its century-old wealth tax in 2007 after IKEA's founder fled to Switzerland. Post-abolition, the propensity of wealthy Swedes to emigrate dropped 30%, and Sweden now has the world's highest ratio of dollar billionaires per capita. The pattern is clear. Wealth taxes on mobile assets historically yield negative revenue because the erosion of the tax base outweighs the receipts from the tax. The capital leaving California is not disappearing. It's reshaping the economic map of the United States. Texas absorbs more California migrants than any other state, over 102,000 people a year. IRS data shows California lost $5.6 billion in taxable income to Texas alone during the pandemic. Austin, now dubbed Silicon Hills, houses Tesla's headquarters, Oracle's US operations, Apple's second campus, and Google's expanding offices. Governor Rick Perry famously ran radio ads in California markets back in 2013. I hear building a business in California is next to impossible. Come check out Texas. Florida has become Wall Street South. The state gained nearly 30,000 affluent taxpayers in 2021 to 2022 alone, adding $28.7 billion in AGI. Ken Griffin moved Citadel's headquarters from Chicago to Miami and is building a $2.5 billion tower in Brickell Bay. Over 300 hedge funds and financial firms now operate in Palm Beach County. Miami debuted on the Global Financial Centers Index at number 24 worldwide. Tennessee is emerging fast. California is now Tennessee's biggest feeder state, sending roughly 22,000 residents in 2023. Oracle is building a Nashville headquarters for 8,500 tech jobs at a cost of $1.2 billion. Amazon chose Nashville for a major corporate hub. Nevada has absorbed approximately 158,000 Californians since 2020. In Reno, 75% of people searching for homes on Redfin are from California. The backlash from receiving states is real. Don't California my Texas became a political slogan across the Sun Belt. Similar slogans appeared in Arizona, Idaho, Oregon, and Colorado. Demographers project California will reach roughly 40 million by 2030 and 40.5 million by 2040. Growth, yes, but far below earlier forecasts of 44 million by 2030. The population is aging rapidly. The share of residents aged 65 and older is projected to rise from 16% in 2024 to nearly 25% by 2050. Politically, the state faces projected losses of 2 to 5 congressional seats after the 2030 census. One of the most significant shifts in political power in recent American history. The Brennan Center projects a loss of 4 seats from 52 to 48. States gaining seats, Texas and Florida, are predominantly Republican governed. The Brennan Center concluded, the 2020s are shaping up to be the South's decade. California's policy responses have been mixed. Every proposed wealth or exit tax has died in committee. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023 all failed. Newsom has opposed all of them. The 2026 ballot initiative requires about 875,000 signatures to qualify and faces opposition from Newsom, major gubernatorial candidates, and a well-funded technology sector. There are promising reforms. In June 2025, Newsom signed legislation exempting most urban infill housing from CEQA review, what his office called the most consequential housing reform in modern history. The Cal Competes tax credit has supported over 1,200 companies and 160,000 jobs. Experts on both sides say the same thing. California's economy remains extraordinarily powerful. It's still the world's 4th largest economy, the undisputed capital of venture capital, and a global agricultural and trade powerhouse. But its governance model faces a fundamental tension. The services demanded by a progressive electorate depend on revenue from a small mobile class of taxpayers who increasingly have both the means and the motivation to leave. There are 2 paths forward. Path 1, the reforms continue, the billionaire tax fails at the ballot, housing gets built, regulations get streamlined, and California stabilizes as a high-cost but high-value economy, something like Switzerland or Singapore, sustained by AI, biotech, and venture capital. The talent stays because the ecosystem is irreplaceable and the money follows the talent. Path 2, the political incentives prove too strong. The supermajority continues raising taxes on a shrinking base. The structural deficits grow, the middle class keeps leaving, and California enters what economists call a managed decline. Not a collapse, but a slow, steady erosion of fiscal capacity, political power, and quality of life. Something closer to what happened to Detroit over 50 years, stretched out across the largest state economy in America. The proposed billionaire tax crystallized this tension into a single policy question. And the answer, hundreds of billions of dollars in wealth departing in a matter of weeks, suggests the limits of California's governance model are closer than many assumed. California has survived earthquakes, droughts, the Great Depression, the dot-com bust, and the Great Recession. It invented Silicon Valley, fed the nation, filmed the world, and generated more economic output than almost every country on Earth. It has done so many things right for so long that the idea of it failing feels almost impossible. But here's what the data tells us. $1 trillion has left. 3 million more Americans have moved out than moved in since 2010. Nearly 800 corporate headquarters have relocated. The budget swings by $175 billion depending on whether a handful of tech stocks go up or down. The state loses a taxpayer every minute and 44 seconds. And the question nobody in Sacramento seems willing to answer is this: what happens when the people paying for everything decide they've had enough? Because that's not a hypothetical anymore. We're watching it happen in real time.